The text from Mom. Stop by and grab the old file drawer from the basement. Grown men ought to keep the household recipes. No greeting, no question. Just that tone, like always. I was 31. Name's Colin, radiology tech, living in Skokie, Illinois, trying to save for a condo I'd never get around to buying. Haley, my girlfriend back then, looked over my shoulder and laughed. She thinks you cook, she said. I should film you fumbling with a measuring cup. Your Uber Eats history has more variety than your spice rack, I shot back. Then keep the camera handy. Just in case this turns into a family documentary, Carolyn, she hated being called Mom past the age of 16, lived on a quiet cul-de-sac in Northbrook. Her lawn was aggressively trimmed, her shutters always just a little too perfect. When we pulled up, the place looked frozen in time. Inside, she did the fake cheek kisses, lips barely touching air. Basement, she said, back corner near the water heater. Don't make a mess. Same tone she used the day she found me crying at 12 and asked if I was trying to make a scene. Kenneth, her husband, not my dad, grunted from his recliner and didn't even glance up. Game show volume was loud enough to cover any real conversation. Nothing new there. The basement was colder than I remembered. Damp, like paper gone soft around the edges. The overhead light flickered once, then steadied. I followed her directions and found the thing. A dented, rust-stained metal drawer unit pressed against the cement wall. Masking tape labels peeling off. Receipts? Taxes 1997 to 2002. MISC. I tugged on the bottom drawer and it jammed halfway. I crouched down, jimmied it with a screwdriver from an old paint can, and finally got it loose. It screeched like a dying animal. Haley called down, "You break it, you're keeping it!" I didn't answer, just hauled the whole cabinet up the stairs, one hand under the base to keep it from buckling. Carolyn wasn't in the kitchen. Kenneth turned the TV up a notch. I plopped it down on the floor by the counter, expecting greasy old recipe cards with Carolyn's block handwriting and notes like, "No pepper, Kenneth hates." Instead, the Miskern folder held a thick manila envelope, bloated with rubber-banded photos, a couple VHS tapes, and a spiral notebook. Haley leaned in, her reporter instincts already lit. She alphabetized her meatloaf recipes? I pulled the first photo free. It showed a kid in Oshkosh overalls, standing in a patch of grass, holding a juice box. My stomach jerked. He looked like me, 5 years old, give or take. But the house behind him wasn't ours, and the mailbox had a different number. I flipped it over. Date stamped. July 13th, 1991. No caption, just the photo lab code in the corner. Haley squinted. "Colin, check more." I started spreading the prints across the counter, sorting by lab envelopes, dates, codes. The years didn't line up with where we were living back then. None of it did. That's when I spotted the receipt, tucked behind a batch of matte prints. Quick print, 1 hour. Dated the day before my 5th birthday party. Handwritten initials. CR. Carolyn's maiden name was Ramsey. Before we dive in, drop your city or country in the comments. Let's see where everyone's tuning in from today. Thanks. Okay, let's jump into the story. Something in my chest dropped. Cold. Heavy. I looked at Haley. Start filming. Now she didn't hesitate. Raised her phone and hit record, steady hands like she was covering a crime scene. The notebook wasn't recipes. It was notes. Lined pages with Carolyn's precise lettering. My name, my sleep patterns, nightmares, dosage logs for Benadryl. Kenneth coughed behind us, saw the photo spread, and paused. His eyes flicked to one of me with a man I didn't recognize, and then he looked away. Fast. That's when I knew. He'd seen these before. Maybe not all of them, but enough. I turned to Haley. Shoot the notebook pages. Every one. Front and back. She nodded, tapped the screen for stills while video ran, and I went back to the folder. I wasn't hunting recipes anymore. I was looking for whatever Carolyn hadn't meant me to find. I lined the photos by year on Carolyn's kitchen table, pushing aside the stupid vase of fake peonies like it didn't matter anymore. Glossy prints curled at the corners, sorted into rows. 90, 91, 92. I checked every envelope's processor code, the mini lab stamp, the handwritten dates on the back in Carolyn's tidy block ink. None of it matched where we lived those years. Not even close. Haley stood over me with her phone still rolling, staying quiet, but sharp-eyed. I reached back into the MISC folder and something slid free. Paper, thick stock, off-white. I opened it flat and just stared. My first name was right. My middle name, too. But the last name? Not even close. And the birthday, off by 4 months. The birthplace? A Rust Belt city I'd never set foot in. I read it again. It didn't change. My hand went clammy against the certificate. Haley leaned in and read the birth parents' names out loud, slow. Lukasz and Danica. Stavanovich. Names with vowels stacked like they were trying to block the door. My hands were shaking now. I sat hard into the nearest chair and stared at the laminate floor like it might explain something. I breathed the way I coach patients through claustrophobic scans. 4 in, hold 4, 6 out. It didn't help. "Haley," I said, "dial 911. She hesitated just for a beat. "Colin." "Now," I snapped. "Tell them we may be looking at an interstate abduction. Ask for a supervisor. Keep recording." She nodded once and turned away, thumb moving fast on her phone screen. While she talked, I kept digging. I found a clipping, yellowed like it had been folded and unfolded too many times. The headline said, "Boy missing from birthday party. Family pleads for return." The picture? A kid wearing a paper crown, mouth mid-laugh, eyes wide. My eyes. My chest went tight. I'd worn a crown like that in a photo Carolyn kept on the fridge for years. Another envelope had contact sheet strips from a roll of film. 6 images in a row, all of a playground I didn't recognize. I flipped it over. Quick print 1 hour, again. Dated August 1991. Scribbled in ink, "Dupes OK, C." The same tidy C I'd seen on the first receipt. I didn't wait. I picked up my phone, called directory assistance for the city listed on the birth certificate. Got connected to a bakery on the street listed on one of the envelopes. Figured I'd try anything with a landline still listed. It felt dumb, desperate. A woman answered with a thick Eastern European accent and the tired cheerfulness of someone who'd been standing all day. I asked, "Do you happen to remember the Stovanovich family from back in the day?" There was a pause, just long enough to feel it in my gut. Then she said, "Everyone knew them. They lost a boy, a little boy. It was sad I heard paper rustle." She said she still kept the old wall calendar with cake orders and names from that summer. That was all I needed. The dispatcher came on speaker through Haley's phone. "Can you tell me what you're seeing?" she asked. I stepped closer and said it flat, loud enough to be heard. "My name is Colin Ramsey, but we found documents that suggest I'm the missing boy. The one from the clipping. I think I was taken." Kenneth shuffled into the kitchen doorway, eyes on Haley's phone. His mouth opened like he was about to say something. Then he did. "Carl." He caught himself, but it was too late. That wasn't my name. He said it like a reflex, like a name he'd used before, a name from the notebook. I stared him down and pointed to the stove. "Haley, get the kitchen clock in frame. Timestamp it." I didn't trust a single thing not on video now. She panned the phone across the clock, then to the counter where the photos and folder were laid out. I'd thrown on a pair of yellow dish gloves from under the sink, half as a joke when I first touched the folder. But now they were keeping evidence clean. "I've got everything," she said. "Clock, photos, receipt, the notebook." The dispatcher asked us to stay put. "An officer will respond shortly and will notify federal agencies as appropriate. Do not leave the premises." They conducted a brief on-site interview, photographed the documents, and after a verification call with the State Records Unit, asked us to accompany them later for an in-person confirmation. "I'm not going anywhere," I told her. Haley reached over and squeezed my shoulder, her hand solid. "You're doing everything right." she said quietly, then turned the phone back to the documents. She moved slow, careful, photographing the lab stamps and the envelope backs like it was second nature. I stood there, staring at the birth certificate in my gloved hands, reading the wrong birthday over and over like I could will it into matching what I'd believed for 31 years. Carolyn had baked cakes on a different day, sent me to school with cupcakes in plastic containers on that day, gave me presents wrapped in stiff department store paper on that day. Anytime I asked about my baby photos, she'd say, "You were a hard baby. We didn't take many." Anytime I asked why I didn't remember preschool, she'd say, "That's normal. Don't dig." Kenneth hadn't moved from the doorway. His eyes looked glassy, like he'd swallowed his tongue, but I didn't care if he croaked or sobbed. He knew something. He'd always known. The sirens were still far off, but getting louder. Haley took a wide shot of the kitchen, pulled back, and caught Kenneth in the frame. She didn't even flinch when he stepped out of view. My fingers itched to rip that folder apart, but I didn't. Not yet. I'd seen what contamination does in court cases. Evidence matters, sequence matters, stamps, ink, paperweight. I'd done enough chain of custody reports in the hospital to know what holds and what cracks. I sat down again, harder this time, looked at the crown in that news clipping and tried to remember what came after it. Balloons, cake, a camera. Nothing came, just white noise. But I knew one thing for damn sure. This wasn't over, not even close. The back door squeaked like it always had, just loud enough to snap your attention without sounding broken. Carolyn walked in, holding garden shears in one gloved hand and a bucket of clippings in the other. Her smile was dialed in, tight, polite, not a fraction too warm. Then she saw the kitchen. Photos everywhere. My gloved hands. Haley filming. The MISC folder wide open on her perfect table runner. She didn't blink. Her eyes barely paused on the 1-hour receipt, the notebook, the birth certificate laid out beside the envelope strips. Just one flicker, then nothing. She set the shears on the counter like she was about to wash up for lunch and said, "You were miserable back then." I fixed it, I didn't move. "Haley, get her full frame!" She panned the camera slowly, steady as always, and I looked right at Carolyn. "You worked at a 1-hour photo lab, didn't you?" She gave a half shrug, and that same rehearsed smirk she'd use when returning a blouse with the tag still on. "We all had side jobs in the 90s. Wasn't a crime to make copies. Day before a boy vanished at his birthday party," I said. I held up the receipt. "Your initials are on this. You signed for the duplicates." Kenneth stepped into the room, like he'd just remembered he lived there. He looked like a man realizing he'd missed the last exit 5 miles ago. "You said the agency," he muttered, eyes locked on Carolyn. She didn't even turn to him. "Would you have agreed if I'd told you the truth?" she snapped. The sirens reached the street, low, controlled, already slowing. Blue light flickered across the front window. Tires crunched the gravel. Carolyn always made me rake back into line. I stepped between her and the folder, still holding the receipt. "Where did you get the pre-party pictures?" She sighed like she was explaining a grocery return. "His parents brought in rolls for developing. I made a set for us. He had my father's eyes. It was meant Haley didn't say anything, just tightened her grip on the phone. She zoomed in on Carolyn's face, catching every word. The first officer through the door was calm, eyes moving fast. I stepped forward before Carolyn could spin a word. "We've preserved the evidence. Nothing's been moved since we called. Video has been rolling. We need collection kits, evidence bags. Document everything. Please." That got his attention. "You a cop?" "Radiology tech. I've worked chain of custody in hospital cases. I know what holds up in court." He nodded once and motioned for the second officer to start logging. Carolyn stood perfectly still while they moved through the room, but the edges of her calm were fraying. I saw it when she looked at the spiral notebook, pages open to dosage logs and scribbled notes about my sleep patterns, my fears, even my dreams. Haley tapped the page gently with one finger. You dosed him with Benadryl? She asked, voice sharp. Carolyn tried to look hurt. He had allergies. You wrote, to make him sleep longer, Haley said. Not to help him breathe. The room shifted. No one was playing anymore. I turned to the senior officer, now joined by two more. FBI, judging by the jackets. There's a VHS tape in the drawer. Label says, Snow Day Show, Miss R's class, kindergarten age. Carolyn rolled her eyes. He doesn't even remember that. None of it matters. You can't charge someone for a dream. That's not your call, the agent said. His tone didn't change, but his hand moved toward the cuffs at his belt. Step over here, please. She didn't fight it. She just glanced at Kenneth once, and he looked away like he always did. They cuffed her hands behind her back. The snap of metal was sharp in that perfect, silent kitchen. As they read her rights, she looked at me with a face I'd seen when she got caught lying about a coupon expiration. Tight-lipped, superior, annoyed. She said, We gave you everything. You had clothes, school, safety. You never went hungry. We gave you more than they could. I took one step closer and kept my voice level. You stole what wasn't yours. She didn't answer. They walked her out, one on each side. The garden gloves were still on her hands. Kenneth sank into a chair like the bones had gone out of him. His eyes landed on the birth certificate but didn't focus. You knew, I said. You called me Carl. I was told not to ask questions, he mumbled. She said it was through an agency. That the papers? You didn't ask questions because you didn't want the answers. He looked up, eyes watery and dull. I didn't want to lose what we had. What you had was a lie. Haley touched my back lightly. Colin, she said. Just that. Enough to pull me back. The agents were bagging the notebook, the photos, the tape. One asked if we had clean copies of the footage. Haley handed over a flash drive she'd prepped during the call. Full continuity, she said. Clock time is in frame on 2 angles. The officer nodded. You did everything right. I watched them seal the receipt, the envelope with the "Dup's okay" C note, the pages about my dreams. My stomach churned when I saw the word wallpaper scribbled next to daisy pattern. I hadn't told anyone about that. Not ever. It was a flash from a dream I thought I made up, a kitchen I'd see in my head when I was sick as a kid. I turned back to Kenneth. He didn't say another word. One agent stayed behind, said they'd be in touch about the VHS and asked me to write down everything I remembered, about Carolyn, about what she said when I was little, about that Snow Day show. I said I would. I didn't sit. I couldn't yet. Haley pulled off her gloves and finally stopped recording. Her hands were red from holding the phone so long. She slipped her fingers into mine. I let her. Outside, Carolyn was being loaded into the cruiser. Her mouth moved, but the windows were shut. I didn't care what she was saying anymore. The door clicked shut. She was someone else's problem now. They cleared Haley to ride with me as a support person. The car ride was dead quiet. Haley sat beside me, 2 FBI agents in front. No one asked how I was feeling. I appreciated that. I wouldn't have known what to say. We pulled up to a small, boxy house in Hammond, Indiana. Vinyl siding, pale yellow. Garden out front, low and tidy, with a little stone bench beside a dented mailbox. The numbers had worn down so much the 4 looked like a crooked one. The agent in the passenger seat said, "We confirmed the address, and they agreed to meet with us." I followed them up the walk. My hands weren't shaking, but my legs were stiff, like my body knew something I hadn't caught up to yet. Haley stayed just behind me, close enough that I could hear her breath. The door opened before we knocked. She was smaller than I expected. My mother, my real mother, had silver streaks in her dark hair and flour on her hands, dusted all the way to her wrists like she'd been kneading dough. She didn't cry, didn't throw her arms around me, just looked at me and said, "You're here." 3 words, soft like breath, like a prayer that didn't need an answer. Inside, it smelled like yeast and cinnamon. The kitchen was straight from my dreams, Not similar. Exact. Daisy wallpaper. Blue and white checkered curtains. A wooden table with one corner chipped like someone had banged a metal lunchbox against it too many times. I walked in and stopped dead. Couldn't even fake composure. My knees hit the chair before I realized I was sitting. A man stood near the stove. Taller than me, thinner, but with the same heavy eyebrows and the same crooked third toe. He wasn't even barefoot. But I knew. I knew. He didn't rush it either. Just said my real first name. He said it like he'd said it 1,000 times. Quiet, careful, still unsure. I didn't answer right away. I heard it, registered it, and still couldn't make my mouth open. That moment haunted me for days after. I hated that pause. I hated that my own name didn't feel like mine yet. On the counter sat a pie dish, glass-bottomed, still warm. The scent hit me harder than I expected. "We bake this every year," my mother said gently. "For your birthday. Plum strudel. You loved it when you were 4. I looked at it like it might answer something I couldn't. "I don't remember," I said. "I want to. I don't." My father sat across from me, folded his hands on the table like he was bracing for court. "Memory can be rebuilt," he said. "Truth is a good foundation." One of the agents stepped forward. "They've kept a VHS tape we'd like you to see. You said there was a label in the drawer?" "Snow Day show. Miss R's class," I said. They brought it out. A combo player still working, barely. Dust on the vents. My mother wiped it clean with her apron like it was sacred. The video was grainy. Tracking skipped every few minutes. The colors were washed out. But I was there, dead center in a paper snowflake hat, singing off-key and waving at someone in the back row. Haley filmed the screen with their permission. My voice warbled through the static, high, wobbly, but mine. Then came the end credits. The names scrolled slow, and there it was. My mother's maiden name, clear as day. The one Carolyn had always dodged questions about. The one I never saw on any document growing up. "I remember the song," I said suddenly, without thinking. Not the words. But the tune. Haley turned toward me, mouth slightly open. My mother just smiled and nodded. After that, they brought out a shoebox. Small, plain, but heavy with time. Inside were index cards. Dozens of them, each one written by hand. Blue ink, all caps, like they were documenting something important. "We wrote down everything we could remember about you," my father said. "Facts. Real ones. From before I picked up one of the cards. You called the radiator the dragon." Another said, "You cracked eggs with both hands." Another, "You hated socks with seams." I didn't cry, but my throat closed up tight. "Keep writing them," I said. "Do one every Sunday. Just one, until I can match voices with the facts." My mother reached for a pen and grabbed a fresh card without hesitation. "Today's will be the one about the dragon." There were photos too. Real ones. No duplicates, no fake stamps, no doctored dates. Me with jam on my chin, me on a tricycle, me in a tiny red raincoat with crooked sleeves. One showed a scraped knee with a butterfly bandage. "That scar," I said, pointing. "You always said it happened when I was 6. On a bike, my father nodded. "It was a tricycle." "You were 4. You flipped off the curb trying to race a neighbor kid. I touched my leg through my jeans, right where the scar still lived." It had always been a strange memory. Blurry. Too early for the explanation Carolyn gave me. Suddenly, it made sense. "I thought I was making that up," I said. "No," he said. "It's yours." Haley kept filming small pieces, hands gentle with the camera. She didn't crowd the moment. She knew when to fade back. Before we left, I stood in front of the curtains. They were real. Not a dream, not a copy, not some memory Carolyn had faked with staged photos or vague answers. I took out my phone, snapped a single picture, and texted it to myself with one word. "Start here." The first agent called me 2 days later, voice clipped, but not unfriendly. "We're piecing together her timeline," he said. "Your insight will help fill the blanks." I knew what that meant. They were building a case, but I was the context. So I sat at the long table in the field office conference room, folder in front of me, gloved hands flipping photos like film again. Not memories. Evidence. Carolyn had taken a job at a 1-hour photo lab in summer '91. Haley pulled the record from a scanned employee roster out of Joliet. Part-time clerk, evening shift. Her duties? Intake, ordering reprints, labeling batches for pickup. I could almost picture her behind that counter, smile sharp, acting like she belonged. She'd logged every name, every event, every school play, little league game, every birthday, hundreds of snapshots of lives she wasn't part of. The agents called it archival behavior. Like she was shopping for someone. Mine caught her eye. A set dropped off 3 days before the party. Kids in paper crowns, balloons in the backyard, a cake shaped like a train engine. I was dead center in most shots, grinning, trusting. The receipt with her initials, CR, was the slip-up that lasted longer than the lie. She'd scribbled "Dup's okay" on the back of the envelope. That one phrase broke her whole story. She'd shown up to the party with a gift bag and a rehearsed grin, told my real parents she was from Quick Print 1 Hour doing a promotional shoot, and no one questioned it. People didn't back then. You showed up with a camera, you were invisible. Everyone smiled for the flash. Sometime after cake, I vanished. Carolyn told them I'd wandered off while she was packing up, but the truth came out in pieces. She'd asked me to help her check the camera in the car. 5 years old, cake on my shirt, high on sugar and attention. I went. Of course I went. I wish I could say I wouldn't have. But kids follow candy and cameras. I followed her. Haley sat across from me in the conference room, flipping through the spiral notebook again. She planned this like a second job, she said. There's structure in here. Language. Systems. The agents agreed. Carolyn wrote like she was proud of it. Memory hygiene, she called it. Pages and pages of it. Early bedtimes. White noise machines. Rules about no legacy stories. She forced a birthday shift by repetition and routine. I'd said March once in the Daisy Kitchen, but the one I grew up with was July. She rewrote your identity by programming you, one agent said. Like muscle memory. Haley muttered, and when that didn't work, she drugged him. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't need to. In the margin of one notebook page, Carolyn had written, "He keeps asking about preschool. May need to phase out story about old house." Like it was a script error. When they asked her about all the notes during an interview, she shrugged and said, "Because he kept asking." Haley watched the playback of that moment, arms crossed, jaw clenched. She whispered, "Of course you did. You were 5. You had questions, I did. I remembered asking where my stuffed bear went, why I didn't have baby pictures, why we moved so much. The answers changed. Always." Kenneth told the agents he believed it was a legal adoption through some quiet agency. Claimed Carolyn said she'd found a referral after a miscarriage. There was a photocopied form in the drawer, typed header, fake agency name, a notary stamp that didn't match any state records. Haley spotted the inconsistency first. "This notary didn't exist until 1995, she said, tracing the ink lines with her fingertip. "It's a forgery." The document was thin, blurry where the dates had been whited out. The agents logged it, bagged it, moved on. Then came the holidays folder. Dozens of photos of me, picnics, beaches, parks, places we never lived, backdated with scribbled captions like "new neighborhood" and "first snow in the cul-de-sac." But the lab stamps told the truth. These were staged, taken weeks before our supposed move. 3 had faint pencil markings on the back. Resized later. She'd built a false history the same way she'd faked dinner parties and happy family Christmases. The suburb was a set. The pictures were props. We were extras. I found one shot of me holding a carved pumpkin outside a white colonial house. Kenneth was in the background holding a rake. The house wasn't theirs. The photo lab stamp said October 1991. We hadn't moved in until that December. This wasn't your home, Haley said, holding it up. She was rehearsing. The more we looked, the more the tape lines showed. Old furniture that moved between rooms, curtains swapped out for matching ones. The same coat on me in 3 different states. In my job, chain of custody matters, dates, stamps, batch numbers. You train yourself to see what you can prove. I applied that same logic here. I checked the back of every photo, matched the envelope numbers to print batches, looked for duplicate ink codes. Every mistake she made was physical. That's what held up in the lab reports. The agents pulled every photo Carolyn had ever submitted for reprint. Some matched missing persons cases, others didn't. But mine they traced all the way from the envelope with "Dupes OK, C" to the image in the bakery woman's memory. She'd kept a flyer from the party. She mailed it to the bureau. It had the same train engine cake. My name, my real name, was printed at the top in crayon font. I liked trains, I said quietly, holding the flyer in my hands. That part was real. Haley didn't say anything, just brushed her thumb over mine. It was enough. I kept going through the photos one by one. It felt like watching my own life through a distorted mirror, like I'd been living in a photo album someone else assembled. One agent said, "She was methodical." "No," I said. "She was obsessed." He nodded. That too. Carolyn had weaponized the lens. She used snapshots to stitch a lie she could live with. She didn't care what it did to me, only that I smiled in the frame. They hit her with 3 federal charges: kidnapping across state lines, conspiracy to commit identity fraud, and obstruction of justice. No one flinched when the indictment dropped. The U.S. attorney laid it out clean during the press briefing. Chain of custody held, receipts intact, lab envelopes traceable. The photo evidence made the timeline airtight. Carolyn walked into court like she was still in charge of the PTA. Hair set, blazer stiff, no cuffs in front of the jury. Her attorney called her a grieving would-be mother, said she'd suffered multiple miscarriages, said she'd had a break from reality. The judge didn't smile once. Kenneth pled out early: withholding evidence, failure to report a known crime, obstruction by silence. His statement was full of half-hearted regret. He said he was afraid of her and didn't know how to stop the lie once it started. He cried, but only once. Said he was scared of losing the only family he'd ever had. I believed that part. Fear makes cowards, and Kenneth had been scared since the day I met him. Haley kept recording everything we were legally allowed to. She never crossed the line. Just the facts: public hallways, time-stamped courtroom doors, interviews on courthouse steps, quiet clicks, no commentary, documentation, not drama. Her editor called the morning after the arraignment. Wanted the story. Bad. We argued about it in her car, parked outside a CVS. I sat in the passenger seat, arms folded, staring at the dashboard while she laid it out. "You're already in it," she said. "This could help people. Someone might recognize their own story in it. My life isn't a case study. I'm not asking you to sell your trauma, Colin. I'm asking if we can tell the truth. Clean. Useful. With guardrails. If we do it," I said, "we do it with FBI review. Redact what needs redacting. No location data. No telling someone how to steal a kid." Haley nodded. "No copycat bait." We made a joint statement 2 days later. I used both names, my legal name and my birth name. I didn't owe Carolyn anything, but I owed the truth something sharp and clean. The piece Haley wrote didn't try to soften it. No sentimental taglines, no pull quotes. It broke down how one-hour photo labs operated in the 90s, how anyone with a lab slip and a story could duplicate a life. It showed how the system missed people who were never missing in the system at all. When it ran, the emails came fast. Parents, kids, people who weren't sure what they were, adults with mismatched birthdays, families with adoption stories that didn't fully track, a woman who said her baby photo had no lab code and no hospital wristband, a man who hadn't seen his original birth certificate, ever. Haley built a resource page. Step-by-step checklists. Request your original records. Check photo envelopes for mini-lab codes. Verify notary seals. Cross-check birthdays against state logs. Start with the details. Meanwhile, I was still working night shifts at the hospital. 2 days after the article dropped, my supervisor pulled me into a supply room between scans. He shut the door and looked me over like I was a piece of equipment he hadn't seen before. "I saw the segment," he said. "I didn't know whether to shake your hand or offer you time off." "I need the routine," I said. "It helps." He nodded once. "Then take every break." My phone didn't stop buzzing for a week. Unknown numbers, voicemails, texts from people claiming they had a feeling about their childhood. Some were kind, some were creepy. I changed my number and gave the new one to the FBI, the hospital, and both of my families, because that's what they were now. Both, whether I liked it or not. Court days dragged. Carolyn watched me like I was a broken appliance she wanted returned. I stared back. I didn't blink. Kenneth sat in the row behind the defense table most days, staring at his shoes. I never saw him meet my eyes once, not during testimony, not during playback. Not when the prosecutor showed the blown-up receipt with CR scribbled on it in black ink. The courtroom had an eerie stillness when that went up. No one moved. Carolyn's mouth tightened so hard I thought her teeth might crack. She didn't look at the screen. She looked at me. She looked at me like I was ungrateful. I kept my hands folded in my lap. My left thumb tapped against the side of my finger, the way it always does when I'm holding back. The prosecutor made it simple. He lined up the receipt, the lab envelopes, the batch codes, and the matching timestamps. He described Carolyn's memory hygiene strategy as coercive environmental control. The jury barely looked at her by the end of it. When the verdict came, I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just breathed. I walked past the cameras outside. One reporter called my name. Both names, actually. "Colin?" Or... She didn't finish the second one. I turned and said what I'd been thinking for weeks. There's no win here. There's only truth and what you do next. Then I went home. Haley picked up dumplings from a place near the courthouse. We sat on the couch, shoes still on, and ate in silence. Not awkward, not cold, just quiet. Afterward, I slept like I'd worked a double, deep and dead and dreamless. The print shop in the Vital Records office was tucked behind a glass window with faded posters about legal name changes and duplicate death certificates. The woman behind the desk wore glasses on a beaded chain and asked for 2 forms of ID in the court order. I handed everything over with hands that didn't shake but felt too still. She typed fast, keys clicking like she'd done this 1,000 times. Then she hit print, and the machine answered with a mechanical thunk-thunk snap. One perfect sheet rolled out with my real name, real birth date, real city, real parents. She slid it across and smiled, warm, but not soft. "Welcome back." I held it. Not tight. Just long enough to feel the weight of it, the pressure of the official crease down the center, the state seal embedded in the corner, my birthright in ink and watermark. I'd spent over 30 years standing on someone else's story. This one was mine. It was going in a fireproof box with my own damn lock. Haley and I left without saying much. Just sat in the car for a minute with the AC humming low and the document in my lap like a relic. Then we drove straight to the DMV. I filled out the forms line by line, double-checking each letter like I check wristbands on trauma scans. No more typos, no wrong dates, no stories built on paperwork lies. When the guy behind the counter asked if I wanted to keep my previous ID photo, I said no. New name, new picture, new file. Sundays became something else after that. I started showing up to the Daisy Kitchen every week, early enough for coffee, late enough for the oven to be warm. My mother made the plum strudel on my real birthday in March. On the half-year mark, she baked a savory quiche and said, "You lost so many? You get double now." The first time she said it, I didn't respond. The second time, I said, "I'll hold you to that." She laughed. It sounded like home. Each Sunday, they added a new index card to the box. Just one fact from when I was small. Things only they could have known. How I called umbrellas sky hats. How I used to bark back at the neighbor's golden retriever. The song my father hummed under his breath while fixing the radiator. Some old Serbian lullaby that still made my chest go tight. We kept the box on the kitchen counter, next to the toaster. I'd pull a card at random while coffee brewed, read it out loud and try to remember. Some days I could, some days I couldn't. But it wasn't about full recall. It was about building something honest on top of what was real. At work, I scanned a kid who'd fallen off his bike. He was maybe 6, knee scraped raw, red face from crying. His parents hovered too close, trying to keep it together. While the scanner warmed up, I leaned in and said, "I've got a scar just like that. I got it racing a neighbor on a tricycle. Thought I was invincible." The kid sniffled and said, "What's a tricycle?" I grinned. "Something that teaches you how to fall." He smiled, just a little. I got the image in one shot. His parents thanked me like I'd done something holy. A week later, Haley told me the hospital lobby had a new flyer up. Steps to check old family photos and lab prints for missing kid red flags. Chain of custody reminders. What lab stamps to look for. I hadn't put it there, but I smiled when I saw it. Someone had been listening. One Sunday afternoon, I stopped by Kenneth's apartment. He'd moved into a one-bedroom near the train tracks. Ground floor, gray walls, no decorations. He answered the door in socks and a zip-up hoodie that didn't fit right anymore. His hair was thinner. His voice cracked when he said, "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I'm not here to fix anything," I said. "I just didn't want you thinking I was afraid to face you." He nodded slowly, backed up to let me in. The place smelled like reheated coffee and old carpet. We sat at his kitchen table. He didn't offer water, didn't make small talk. He just said, "I'm sorry," like it was a prayer. I didn't say anything back for a while. Then I said, "I'm done carrying your secrets for you. That's your job now." He looked like I'd hit him, but he nodded. I deserve that. Then he reached into a drawer and handed me a wrinkled envelope. Yellowed edges. Postmark from over 20 years ago, but never mailed. My name was on it, in his handwriting. "I wrote this when you were 10. Tried to convince her to tell you the truth." She ripped it up. I taped it back together. I've kept it since I opened it right there. A full-page letter, shaky but real. He'd begged Carolyn to come clean. Said I was asking questions he didn't know how to answer. Said I deserved more than bedtime lies and dodged photos. It hit like a punch I didn't see coming. I didn't forgive him, but I took the letter. Later, during a session, my therapist said, "Memory is stubborn but fair. It gives back what you make room for." I made room on Sundays, over coffee, next to the card box, with strudel and quiet conversations about who I used to be. Some mornings I woke up with a fragment, a sound, a color, the edge of a song, and I'd write it down before it slipped away. I wasn't building a new story. I was restoring the one I'd lost, line by line, with evidence and care and real names on paper. I told Carolyn's lawyer she wasn't to contact me again. Not directly, not through family, not through holidays or fake emergencies. No letters, no calls, no interviews. I didn't need her apologies. I needed distance. Kenneth got a simpler rule. No justifying. He nodded, and to his credit, he kept his mouth shut. One Saturday, Haley and I found a working VCR at a yard sale 2 blocks from the Daisy Kitchen. $10, a layer of dust, and a half-smoked cigar resting on top of the box like a warning. The old man running the table saw me testing the power cord and said, "They don't make them like this anymore. Solid little beast, built like a tank." We grabbed a head cleaning tape and a small bottle of isopropyl with it. Old habits from the hospital. You prep the gear before you trust it. He was right. It was ugly and clunky and perfect. We carried it into my parents' living room, cords trailing behind us like a medical kit. My father helped me plug it into the old TV. He'd kept it in the back room, said he never liked flat screens anyway. Too thin. Can't trust him. We ran the cleaning tape first and let the deck spin for a minute. We pushed in the kindergarten tape, snow day show, Miss R's class. It clicked, whirred, then buzzed to life. The image wobbled a few seconds, then cleared. There I was in the front row, paper snowflake hat half slipping off, mouth wide open, singing a beat behind the others. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. I watched like a stranger, detached. Just a kid with two big teeth and a cowlick that wouldn't stay down. Then came the part that mattered. I turned in the tape, looked toward the crowd, and shouted a name. It wasn't Mom. I didn't catch it the first time, or the second, but the third rewind, it hit. Danny. Haley paused the tape. My mother sat forward, hands over her mouth. That's what you called me, she whispered. That's what you called me before. I nodded. I didn't make that up. No one spoke for a minute. Then my father hit stop on the remote. The room went still. I stood up, took a breath, and reached into my jacket pocket. The box was small, plain. I wasn't fancy about it. I'm not that guy. I walked into the Daisy kitchen, turned to face Haley and said, "You want to keep building this with me?" Her face broke open into something soft but steady. She didn't wait for me to kneel. She just said, "Yes," before I could finish the sentence. Behind us, my mother wiped her eyes with her apron. My father stood and put a hand on my shoulder. It wasn't some dramatic movie moment. It was better. It was real. We picked my real birthday in March for the wedding. No big event. Just the date that mattered. The one that matched the paper, the photos, the facts. Later that week, Haley and I stood under the checkered curtains and took a photo. She sent it to her editor with a 2-line message. "We're okay. We're getting married. Use none of this without permission." The reply came back quick. "Understood. Congratulations." A cousin I'd never met came by that Sunday. She brought a battered photo album wrapped in an old plastic grocery bag. Inside were Polaroids from the early years. Me in mismatched socks, eating cereal, finger painting with backwards C's written in marker on the bottom corner of the pages. "You signed these," she said, flipping to a photo where my name was scribbled across the bottom in shaky toddler handwriting. Backwards letters and all. You couldn't spell yet, but you were proud. It felt like proof, but it also felt like being let in on a joke I didn't know I was part of until now. Haley, always the reporter, started a quiet spreadsheet. She began tracking the tips that came in after her piece ran. Case numbers, regions, former 1-hour labs that used to sit along interstate corridors, places where records disappeared or families moved too fast. She didn't talk much about it. Just kept the document on her laptop and updated it when she had time. No sensationalism, just facts. It's what she does best. Then the FBI asked me to speak. They were hosting a closed-door conference for cold case units, teams from different states, all trying to modernize their approach to analog cases. They wanted me to walk through the box, the documents, the photos, the VHS. I stood at a podium in a hotel ballroom with carpeting older than me and held up the 1-hour envelope. "This is what cracked it," I said. "Check the back of every photo. Look for the receipt. Look for initials, those little things. They're what sink you or save you." They nodded. Some took notes. One asked for a copy of Haley's checklist. I handed out 6. On the drive home, I didn't play music. Didn't talk, just drove. Halfway between exits, I pulled over and sat with the engine off, hands on the wheel. It hit me. I wasn't acting like someone borrowed anymore, not imitating what I thought I should be. I was doing the things I chose, on my terms, in my name. For the first time, I felt like myself. A few months later, the agents called. I was sitting on the back step of the Daisy kitchen, drinking coffee from a chipped mug, when the phone buzzed. Agent Navarro's voice was calm as always, but there was something under it. Satisfaction, maybe. 3 cold cases cracked off the back of Carolyn's notes and Haley's resource page, he said. Same timeline, same patterns. 1-hour labs, fake adoption referrals, P.O. boxes registered a few towns over. They were all buried in plain sight. He gave me the names, though they didn't mean anything to me then, but the method did. Every detail made my skin prickle. In one case, a woman working at a different lab in Michigan had kept a photo she had no right to. A child who wasn't hers. Stored it in her kitchen drawer like a souvenir. She pled out before trial. I didn't need to hear the charges to know what that sickness looks like. That same day, Haley and I opened a small fund under my real name. Nothing flashy. No branding. Just a quiet landing page and a mission. Help families get the documents they need. Certified copies of old records aren't cheap, especially when you're chasing ghosts across decades. We wanted to strip out the excuses. We seeded it ourselves. Then donations trickled in, some from people who knew someone, others from strangers who just said, "For the next kid." Carolyn appealed her sentence. I didn't go to the hearing, didn't watch the live stream, didn't care what the lawyers said. Letting the truth stand without her voice layered over it, that was revenge enough. The receipts, the dates, the envelope codes, the initials, all of it in black and white. No commentary, no rewrite, just proof she couldn't reshape again. Kenneth mailed me a check, $4,500 from the sale of golf clubs I never saw him use. The note read, "For the fund." I deposited it without a return address. Didn't write back. At work, I pitched a lunch and learn session for the imaging staff. Nothing deep, just 30 minutes on chain of custody protocol and why old tech still mattered. I brought the 1-hour envelope with Carolyn's CR initials and set it on the table. This, I told them, is why dates matter. This is why handwriting matters. Stamps, codes, every dot of ink tells a story. Your job is to make sure it's the right one. A guy in the back raised his hand and said his aunt used to run a photo lab out of Peoria. He went home that night, opened a box in her attic, and found 3 envelopes she'd kept, some kind of loyalty prints or unclaimed orders. He turned them in. One of the names matched a file Navarro had flagged. Another knot started to loosen. Every time one unraveled, I felt a little taller, a little steadier. Like the air around me wasn't pressing in anymore. We still went to the Daisy Kitchen every Sunday. That didn't change. Sometimes the index card for the week was silly, like how I called blueberries moon peas, or used to yell at passing trains like they could hear me. Sometimes they were harder. One card read, "You cried if the curtains weren't straight. We had to check them every night." That one landed like a brick. I didn't remember it, but I believed it. I must have needed something to feel right, I said. My mother nodded. You did, and we didn't always know how I don't use words like closure. You don't close something like this. You build a fence around it, make peace with the space it takes up, and you decide who gets through the gate. No one gets to sneak in. Haley's editor pushed for a follow-up. Wanted engagement photos, wedding plans, a new chapter angle. I said no. She backed me without blinking. That's love too, when someone doesn't need the last word. For the fund's first bake sale, my mother made 3 plum strudels. Haley labeled them Old Recipe, New Purpose. We set up outside a farmer's market with a paper sign and a folding table. I didn't expect much, but people came. A woman brought her daughter and said, "We read the article." I checked my files. I didn't find anything off, but I needed to know. My father stood at the end of the table, handing out slices. A kid with gap teeth asked if he could have the recipe. He blinked fast, smiled too wide, then grabbed a napkin and wrote it down in careful block letters, like it was sacred. We got married in March, on my real birthday, under the checkered curtains. 10 people total. No aisle, no speeches. Just the sound of boiling water on the stove and my mother quietly crying behind her apron. I wore a gray suit that finally fit right across the shoulders. Haley wore a long-sleeved dress with pockets because she hates being cold and hates carrying a purse even more. The officiant mispronounced her last name once, and she laughed. Not nervously, just real. My father handed us the rings like they were heirlooms, even though we'd picked them up at a mall jeweler 2 weeks earlier. After the cake, homemade strudel style, we drove to the county clerk's office, still in our wedding clothes. The front desk woman squinted at our paperwork, double-checked the court order, and typed slow like each keystroke might detonate something. The printer clicked once. Clean. Final. The kind of sound you don't forget. She slid the certificate across the counter and said, "Congratulations." But there was something more in her smile, like she understood the weight of what had been corrected. I signed with the name that matched the record, the house, the kitchen, the one from before, and the one I chose to carry forward. We kept the Sunday routine. Every week, another index card. My mother wrote one that said, "You hid crayons in the radiator and said it was so it could breathe colors." My father laughed for a full minute when he read it, then said, "We couldn't get the smell out for weeks." We framed a still from the kindergarten tape and hung it just above the card box. I'm in the snowflake hat, squinting into the crowd, caught mid-blink, mid-song. Underneath it, we printed my first name in thick block letters. No middle name, just the one that mattered. The old metal file drawer, the envelope with CR on the back, the VHS, most of it sits in evidence now. Federal storage somewhere, tagged and cataloged. That's fine. I don't need to hold the artifacts. The parts I need are in this kitchen, where the coffee always smells like history, and the light hits the daisies just right at 9 a.m. I still work nights when the schedule needs it. Keeps me focused, keeps my head clear. I don't avoid the trauma unit. I don't volunteer for it either. But when new texts come on, I tell them the same thing every time. Check the back of the picture. Check the stamp. Check the story. Small stuff saves you. We stayed in cautious contact with Kenneth. He sends cards, no apologies, just weather updates and a dumb joke scribbled on the bottom. I don't need anything more than that. That's all I can handle, and it's enough. Haley keeps the resource page updated. She doesn't say much when she's working on it, but when a stranger emails asking where to start, she always writes the same first line. Ask for the originals. Look for the lab names. Write down the dates. Small things matter. A month ago, we were in the Daisy kitchen, just after breakfast. I was rinsing out mugs when I heard the back door creak open. My father stepped in from the garden, boots muddy, shoulders dusty from trimming hedges. He didn't knock. He never knocks. He just called out over the sound of the faucet. He said my real name, the one I'd had before, the one that got stolen, the one I signed on the marriage certificate, the one written under the photo on the wall. He said it like it belonged to me. No hesitation, no stumble, like it was the only one he'd ever known. I didn't freeze. I didn't flinch. I turned around. Would you confront the stolen past or quietly rebuild? Share your thoughts in the comments. Hit super thanks if you'd like. It supports the channel and keeps us motivated. And don't forget to like and subscribe. It means a lot.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.